2. Cloned subjects in the study showed a more marked variations in biological age and genetic mutations than seen in naturally occurring zygotic twins. In the group of 100 cloned men aged 24 chronological years, and who could reasonably be expected to present as the equivalent of a 48-year-old uncloned human. Key biomarkers showed a range from 34 to 65 years with a median of 53 years. Further research is needed, but exposure to battlefield contaminants and high levels of sustained stress appear to accelerate normal genetic mutations in men, already designed to age at twice the normal rate. By the time Commando clones reach the equivalent of their mid-40s, those mutations are very apparent, and like natural zygotics, they grow apart. Dr. Bora Vajraj, Imperial Institute of Military Medicine, Aging and Tissue Department Degeneration in Kaminoan Clone Troops, Imperial Medical Review, 1675. Republic Administration Block, Senate District, Coruscant, 470 days after geonosis. Can't the cops shift them? Said the security guards on the main doors of the Republic Treasury offices. He stared past Treasury Agent Bethany Renan. Not something that many males managed. With an expression on his face that said he felt the protesters were messing up his nice, tidy forecourt. I mean, they're sympathizers, aren't they? And the cops are just standing there, doing nothing. Bethany hadn't missed the protesters. She'd taken a keen but discreet interest in them, in fact, because the war with the separatists had become an intensely personal one for her. These were expatriate Corinthians protesting about the pounding that their neutral planet had taken in a recent battle. They'd taken up a position opposite what they saw as one of the centers of the war effort, the Defense Department Administration Building, where they seemed to think they might have some impact. Several government offices ringed the pedestrian concourse. Office workers had appeared at the windows to watch for a while, then returned to their desks because it wasn't their war, not yet. They had an army to protect them. They're neutrals, actually, Bethany said. So how would they protest to the separatists? The guards looked at her, visibly puzzled. Holoscreens dotted the wall behind him, giving him a view of every floor and corridor in the building. What do you mean? They're here because they're allowed to be. Where would they go if they wanted to lobby the CIS? The question seemed to have stumped the guard. He shrugged. Want me to see you safely past them, ma'am? I don't think they're a threat, but thanks. Bethany wondered how she was going to spend the evening, but she knew what would occupy her. Worrying about a null arc trooper Captain called Ordo, a man she was too scared to contact because she had no idea if he was on a mission at any given moment, and if a message on his comlink would compromise his safety. I'll risk it. She stepped out into Coruscant's temperate climate-controlled early evening air and gave the small protest a wide berth. A couple of CSF officers in dark blue fatigues were watching the protest from a doorway. One acknowledged her with a nod. She couldn't recognize him because the white ride helmet obscured too much of his face. But she'd had occasionally contact with the Coruscant security force during investigations, and they obviously found it easy to recognize her. She nodded back and clasped her bag more firmly under her one arm. Life went on in Coruscant despite the war. The protest here was a small rock in a river of normality, and the current of office workers and shoppers parted around it on the concourse and merged again downstream, as if nothing had ever interrupted their routine. Bethany wondered if they would flow around her in the same oblivious way. She was another isolated outcrop of the war. 83 days ago, she was an audit officer, and exact detail was her job. A Jedi general had shot her with a non-lethal round, and she'd been plunged into a small, close-knit community of Special Forces troops. It was a window on a world of war without rules, of anonymous heroism, and an extraordinary and totally unexpected affection. And it was her secret. Not even the Treasury knew about it. She'd done things that her Treasury bosses wouldn't have taken at all well, like giving critical data passcodes, Treasury security overrides, to a commando sergeant, like falsifying her reports to cover the fact that she'd let Special Forces move in on her investigation. It's too late to worry about that now. Bethany worried anyway. She walked briskly, anxious to get home, and closed the apartment doors behind her. Another day when she hadn't been arrested that she could check off on the calendar. It's not like me at all. Taking a flyer on trust. She wasn't even aware of someone walking behind her, but a hand touched her shoulder, and she gasped. Guilt made her spin around to find she was staring into the reflective right visor of one of the CSF cops. Her stomach churned. "Oh, no, no, no. Agent Renan," he said. The accent was familiar. Long time no see. But she didn't know him. She was sure. "You have that advantage, officer." Men hit on her a lot less than most people imagined. She knew she was striking, but she also knew that she was a daunting prospect because of it. Even Ordo, hugely confident, recklessly unafraid, treated her warily. Her good looks were a curse most of the time. "What can I do for you?" The cop stood with his fists on his hips. He didn't look like he was going to draw his weapon. Well, I know I'm not quite as unforgettable as my brother, but I thought you'd at least say hi, Mirel. How are things? Oh, oh, Mirel, one of Ordo's 5 Null Arc brothers, Lieutenant Mirel. Bethany's gut lurched in a different way, and she didn't bother to hide her relief. I'm sorry, Mirel. Out of context. So, you didn't recognize me with my clothes on then? A couple of passersby turned to stare. He chuckled to himself. I mean, the armor. Makes a guy look different. Anyway, what kind of covert operator would I be if I was that easy to spot? Come on. Can't stand here getting funny looks all night. Walk this way, and I'll make it worth your while. Okay. And there she was again, just dropping everything and wandering off to do the bidding of a Black Ops unit. This wasn't how the Treasury investigation team worked. She had rules. Can I ask? Otto's fine and sends his best wishes. He's doing a little job with Calbier at the moment. Morel might have been a clone, but he was as individual as any man. He didn't walk like Ordo, and he didn't talk like him. I'll try to teach him some social graces when he gets back. He's got no idea how to treat a lady. Bethany strode along beside him, working on the basis that looking as if this was routine was the best way to avoid attracting attention. I just want to know if he is safe. We are soldiers. We are never safe. Morale. Look at it this way. He headed for a CSF patrol speeder, sitting on a public landing platform overlooking the skyline. The other side's in a lot more danger than we are. Bethany slid into the passenger's seat and didn't ask how he'd acquired the speeder and the uniform. CSF liked the Special Operations clones. Their anti-terrorism chief, Jayla Obram, was very chummy with Sergeant Scarata, Calbier, Papa Cal. Favors were done and questions weren't asked. Bethany envied them that wonderful conspiratorial closeness. Calbier seemed to get away with murder. Are you allowed to tell me how everyone is? She asked. You really do worry about us, don't you? Morel steered the speeder towards her apartment block. She didn't recall telling him where she lived. Okay. Omega's been deployed to the Outer Rim, where someone needs a hand with regime change. Delta are helping out the Marines. Did I miss anyone? Bethany felt a pang of guilt. She had to ask about the first clone she'd ever met. The patient bomb disposal trooper who'd ended up with a temporary desk job after losing both hands. How's Trooper Cora coping with life as a commando? Oh, he's fine. He's learning a few saucy tricks from my brother, Comric. Good man, Cora. And the 2 Jedi officers? Etaine's evacuating colonists from Kulora and Boudica, sorry. General Drusik is due back this week. There were huge gaps in Morel's explanations. Places and times vanished. He seemed to edit the sensitive detail smoothly as he went along. Want to know about Val? He's with Delta. Nobody dead. Baffled, fed up, tired, lonely, bored, hungry, scared. Scared witless. Even having fun, but not dead. Which is a plus. The speeder climbed and darted between the skylanes to veer around the front of her apartment block. Yes, Morel definitely knew exactly where she lived. He set the speeder down on the right platform, on her balcony, and opened the hatches. So, are you still up for doing us a few favors, without your bosses finding out? Morel was the front line of a war that most Coruscanti never saw, and weren't fighting. Bethany asked herself as she had on that first night, whether her tidy little rules mattered more than a man's life. Morel slipped his helmet off and sat looking at her expectantly. Ordo, and yet not Ordo, and Core too. Core's existence, she had no other word for it, and it summed up so many aspects of a clone's life. Had upended her, left her feeling upset, angry, betrayed, and yes, guilty. Her government might have let her down as a citizen and an employee, but it had totally betrayed this slave army. I'm letting emotions get in the way. But isn't emotion the way we can tell what's really right and wrong? Let's talk, she said. Morel walked around her apartment with a comm scan, checking for surveillance devices. Can't be too careful, but then you know all about this game, being a treasury spook. You would be amazed how seriously people try to avoid financial regulations. I would, he hesitated, by her sofa as if he might sit down, but stayed standing as if he remembered he wasn't allowed on the furniture. He looked her over. And you're still not armed. You need to do something about that. Well, simple question. Are you willing to do some investigation for us? What kind of investigation? Defense expenditure and budget forecasts. It couldn't be that simple. Those are public documents anyway. I don't think all the details I need are in them. It's very sensitive stuff. Might involve the Chancellor's office. Bethany felt her scalp tighten as adrenaline flooded her bloodstream. She didn't feel that she could sit down either. Not now. Can you narrow down what I might be looking for? Procurement fraud, bribes? You might well find that, said Morel. But I'm more interested in transactions involving Commando and the payment schedules. Bethany couldn't imagine anything that would turn up except fraud. Or maybe the Republic was arming someone it claimed it wasn't. The investigator in her told her to ask more questions. But the public servant within asked if she really needed or wanted to know more this time. I can drill right down to the individual credit transfers, she said at last, which might give you so much information that it takes you nowhere. Don't worry. I'm good at collation. She took a breath. She was in it up to her neck now. A few more centimeters wouldn't make much difference. Why are you trusting me with this? Well, for a start, I know where you live. Marilla smiled, with genuine humor. But she'd also seen how fast, earnest, polite Otto could snap into being an assassin without a second thought. And we don't take prisoners, but our lives could depend on that information. Which is what really makes the difference to you, isn't it? It was an ethical choice between rules or lives, and rules didn't always translate into what was right. You know it is. Then we'd be especially interested in any evidence of planned payments to Commando for more clones beyond, say, the end of the next financial year or not. Bethany guessed that this was the point at which she ought to have decided. She had no need to know more. Okay, what aren't you telling me? Myrtle shrugged. That I took a big risk getting the information that led me to ask you for more information. What's Cal's view on this? She didn't even have to ask if Cal Scarata knew. The Knowles didn't seem to take a breath without asking him first. Their allegiance was to him, not the Republic. But while she could understand the power of his aggressive charisma, she wasn't sure if it was a good idea. And what happens if I get caught? One, he trusts you, Marilla said deadpan. Two, they'll probably shoot you. He wasn't joking now. She knew it. Okay, she said. I'll make a start in the morning. How do I contact you? Comlink. He held out his hand and she dropped her comlink into its palm. Then he cracked open the case, frowned at the device entrails, and took out a tiny toolkit that looked like a toy in his palm. Once I've made it secure, dear oh dear, ma'am, tell me you haven't called order on this. No, I haven't. She felt useless and naive. I thought it might compromise his safety. Morel looked up for a moment, eyebrows raised. Right answer. That's why we trust you. He prodded and poked inside the comlink for a while, and then snapped the case shut again. Totally secure now. At least once you use the prefix I'm going to give you. You can even call it Ordo. He might be defusing a bomb or something when I call. Bethany always thought things through in a meticulous sequence, which made her all the more horrified to see how easily she took this dangerous leap of faith. I'll wait for him to call me, thanks. See? Calbier said you had the right stuff. Common sense. Got it, sister. No. Shame. He replaced his helmet and suddenly became just another Galactic City cop. Anyway, got to go. Any message for Ordo? Should have thought ahead. Stang. What can I say? She and Ordo weren't exactly a romantic role model. They just had a drink in the CSF bar, and then a string of awkward, embarrassed conversations, when everything was implied and not much said. But the bond was strong, and so was her duty to do the right thing for his brothers. Tell him I miss him. Ask him what his favorite meal is, and tell him I'll cook it for him when he comes back. It's robot sausage with gravy, and he's fussy about the pepper oil. Hang on. Bethany looked around for something to send him, but there was nothing in a woman's apartment that would be of any use or amusement to a soldier. There was food, though. Clones were always peckish, all of them. She rummaged in the conservator and hauled out a family-sized cheffa cake, whose top was paved with glittering candied nuts. Something she'd kept just in case unexpected guests showed up, but they never did. Have you got room for something small? How small? She was nothing if not exact. Okay, 25 centimeters diameter. I'll warn him not to swallow it whole. Morel tucked the container under one arm, then reached inside his jacket. He withdrew a small blaster. Calbier insisted I make you carry this. Go, careful, ma'am. Bethany took it, numb, while a voice at the back of her mind asked if she'd lost her senses. He stepped out onto the platform, and a few moments later, the police speeder lifted into the evening sky, vanishing in a blur of taillights. She locked the balcony doors and drew the blinds, the blaster still gripped in her hand. She felt observed. There was no other word for it. But that was her conscience nagging. When she looked at her fingers curled around the weapon, it seemed like someone else's hand and nothing to do with her at all. So he thinks I might need to use this. Better work out how. I'm going to cover my tracks. She was a forensic auditor. She knew how to uncover the hidden tracks of others. All the places they hid data or salted away credits, or blew smoke across the audit trail. It was just a matter of reversing the process to cover her own. The only complication was that the trail might lead to the very highest level of government. She'd never been so scared and alone in her life. She could only begin to imagine what Odo and the rest of the Commando forces face on a daily basis. Kamna Moon, Agama, Outer Rim, 471 days after Geonosis. So, Mando, you like her. A gently curved, transparent steel bubble bobbed on the surface of the water, looking like one of those little transparent submersibles that showed tourists the wonders of the Bildigari ocean floor. But then it lifted slowly to reveal something much, much larger, and not very leisurely oriented at all. Sergeant Kalskarata washed the water stream off the rising hull and wondered if he'd lost his mush, coming all this way to buy a submersible. The price was more than he'd budgeted for, but if you hunted Kaminoans, you needed aquatic capability, however much its cost. And he was hunting an elusive one, Chief Scientist Kosai. Not to your taste? Asked the Rudian merchant. Skarata grunted behind the impenetrable mask of his sand gold helmet. The handy thing about being a Mandalorian doing business was that you didn't need to keep a straight face, and only the terminally stupid ever tried to dupe you. They only tried it once, too. Is okay, I suppose. It's a beast, the Rhodian said, bouncing around on the Gary Square side like a demented acrobat. Rhodians always struck Skrata as looking comically harmless, totally at odds with their true nature, which was why he had an extra blade ready in his sleeve, just in case. Every one unique and handcrafted Monkal's finest. Won't take much work to make this It's a freighter. I asked for a freighter. I asked for a fighter. I can throw in a few extra cannons. How long's that going to take? Is this for the raw effort? Skrata could see the Rhodian mentally hiking the price in the expectation that the bill would be met by one government or another. Profiteering and war went hand in hand. No, said Skrata, I'm a pacifist. The Rhodian eyed the custom Verpine sniper rifle slung across his shoulder. You're a Mandalorian. Skrata let his three-sided knife drop from his right forearm plate. Point first and caught the hilt in his hand. Would you start a fight with me? No. See? I'm a force for peace. He spun the knife and slid it back into the housing mounted above his wrist. What's the maximum range then? Depth, 1 kilometer. Atmos speed, 1,000 clicks. Goes like a greased rontor. The freighter was above the waterline now. 45 meters of smooth, dark green curves, with 4 hemispherical drive housings protruding above her stern, like a knuckle duster. It was a Mon Calamari deep water class. Packs 90 tons of cargo, 8 crew. It's got a decent defensive cannon. Hyperdrive is. The Rhodian stopped and looked to one side of Skrata. Odo came ambling along the quay side and paused beside the freighter. Left thumb hooked in his belt, except for his gait. Always the Arc Trooper captain, back slightly arched as if he had both Gar-issue pistols holstered. He was just another Mando in battle-scarred armor. The Rhodian fidgeted as Ordo inspected the drive housings from a distance, and then jumped with a hollow thud from the cray side onto the casing. I don't like the color, Ordo muttered. He prodded his toe cap into the manual overdrive of the port hatch and popped the seals. I'll just inspect the upholstery. Skrata turned to the Rhodian. My boy's a picky lad, I'm afraid. I've lost count of the crates we've looked at this week. I could get you a Hydrosphere Explorer if you're prepared to wait a few weeks. The merchant dropped his voice. An Ubrikian Repulsor sub, a V-fin, a Trade Federation submarine even. Yeah, I'd really love the trade boys to come after me when they find a bit of their navy missing. You're so suspicious, you Mandalorians. You're not wrong there. How much? 150,000. I don't want to buy the whole fleet, son. Just one hull. Hard to find these deep waters. You know, that trade-fed idea wasn't bad. Maybe I ought to go see their procurement people. Because if I bought a real sub direct from the manufacturer instead of this day tripper. Scarata heard Oda's voice in his earpiece. Calbia, I think Prudy can get this cannoned up nicely. He didn't want a regular submarine anyway. He needed a multi-purpose vessel, like the Mon Cal Tub here. The Rhodian had no idea what he wanted, or how badly he wanted it, or even if he could afford it. Scarata jangled his credit chips in his belt pouch, giving the alluring sound a little longer to soften up the Rhodian's resistance, walking slowly up and down the quay as if he was thinking about something else. Come on, Attica, he said to Ordo, letting the merchant hear. Got another 5 vessels to look at yet. Haven't got all day. Just checking the hull integrity, Ordo said. Good things. Helmets. Nobody could hear what was being said on the comlink outside the Baisi unless you let them. Ordo was using all his state-of-the-art armor sensors to check for metal fatigue, leaks, and other mechanical faults. Scarata noted the readouts being relayed to his spiking new HUD display. A small and necessary extravagance paid for by dead terrorists. They were at their nicest when dead, he thought. Oda let out a long breath. It looks a little stained inside, but otherwise this is a sound vessel. I'd take it if I were you. I'll still knock the price down. Is the leak bad? Scarata asked, theatrically loud. What leak? The Rhodian demanded. There's no quivering leak. My boy says there's water damage. Scarata paused for effect. Orca, come up and tell him. Oda emerged from the hatch and stood on the hull, with his hands on his hips, head slightly to one side, the decking and the upholstery water stains. It's a submarine, the Rhodian snapped. Of course it's got water stains. What do you want, a sail barge or something? I thought you Mandos were supposed to be hard, and here you are, whining on like namies about water stains. Now, that's not very customer-focused, Scarata said. He reached slowly into his belt pouch and pulled out a handful of cash credits, all big denominations, with their values tantalizing visible. Not many ship merchants could resist the lure of a ready reg of creds, and deferred gratification didn't look like the Rhodian's strong suit. I think I'll take my customs elsewhere. The Rhodian might have been mouthy, but he wasn't mathematically challenged. His beady little eyes darted over the chips. You would have a problem getting one of these anywhere else. The monk halls aren't selling them to the Seps. If the Rhodian wanted to think they were looking for the Separatists, that was fine. Nobody expected to see a Mandalorian looking for the Republic, and the Rhodian hadn't asked. Scarata crooked his finger to beckon Ordo, and the gnoll strode behind, boots crunching on the sanded boards of the jetty. The trick was to walk away briskly and purposefully. They were both very good at that. Even if Scarata's leg was playing up and he was limping more than usual. There was a moment, a critical second, when one or the other side would crack. If they kept on walking, it would be the Rhodian. And Jedi thought they were the only ones who could exert a little mind influence, did they? 120, the Rhodian called after him. Scarata didn't break his stride. Neither did Ordo. 80, he called back. 110. They only cost 100 now. It's got extras. It needs to be gold-plated to be worth that. They were still walking. Oda made a little grunt, but it was hard to tell if he was annoyed or amused. Okay, 90, the Rhodian called. 80, cash credits, Scarata said, not turning around. In fact, he speeded up. He counted to 10 and got as far as 8. Okay, the Rhodian said at last. I hope you'll be happy with it. Scarata slowed and then turned around and ambled back, casually counting out his credits. Ordo jumped onto the hole and disappeared down the open hatch. Oh, I'll be back pretty fast if I'm not, Scarata said. That's why I don't need a warranty. The deep water's drives roared into life, sending white foam churning across the harbor. The jetty trembled. Does he know how to drive that thing? The Rhodian asked. My boy knows how to do just about anything. Fast learner. Scarata skidded across the wet hole and sealed the hatch behind him. Oda was already in the pilot's position in the narrow cockpit, helmet on the console, looking as if he was talking to himself. As he touched each of the controls in sequence, he had an eidetic memory, like all the gnolls. Just one quick canter through the manual before they set out, and Ordo had the theory down pat. Scarata was ferociously proud of him, as he was all his boys. But he resented the damage the Kaminoans had done to them in the creation of what they were. Sure would be the perfect soldier. Their brilliance came at a price. They were all troubled souls, unpredictable and violent, the product of too much genetic tampering and a brutal infancy. Scarata would punch any fool who dare call them nutters. But they were a handful even for him sometimes. But they were his life. He'd raised them as his sons. The Kaminoans had wanted to terminate them as a failed experiment, and just thinking about that still made Scarata long for revenge. All Kaminorans were sadistic vermin as far as he was concerned, and he counted their lives as cheaply as they counted the clones they bred. Kosai would be one of the lucky ones. He needed her alive, for a while at least. So my boys were surplus to requirements, were they? So will you be, sweetheart. Odo slid open the throttle and the deep water was under way. Churning foam. The Rhodian dwindled to a doll. Then a speck on a receding jetty, and they were in open sea beyond the harbor limits. Let's go catch some AWA bait then. Scarata wondered why he was worried about diving in a sub when he was perfectly happy to fly in cold, hard space. He'd done enough maritime exercises on Commando after all. Heard from Morel yet? Yes. He's on his way. Yes. He got Agent Renan to do the job. And yes, he gave her the blaster. Agent Renan. Come on, son. You've got a short enough life as it is. Go for it. She's a tough one, or Atinla. Odo didn't take the bait. Marika says she sent me a chefa cake. Odo was touchingly clueless about women. Scarata knew he'd failed him on the emotional education front. You're well in there, son. Smart, tough girl. She was a striking leggy blonde, too. But that was farther down the list for Mandalorians. At the capability and endurance, she was actually too beautiful for people to feel comfortable around her. And so Scarata counted the poor kid among his growing collection of outsiders and social rejects. You deserve the best. If only there were a manual for females, Calbia. If there is, I never got my copy. Oda turned his head and gave Scarata a look that said it was no comfort to hear that. Odo now knew what Scarata had kept from the clones for so long. That his marriage had foundered, and his two sons had eventually declared him Darbria no longer a father. The divorce of a parent, possibly the greatest shame in Mandalorian society. It was the only thing he'd ever kept from the Knolls, apart from retaining Termuken's pregnancy. Does that worry Ordo? Does he believe me? I had to disappear. We all had to train our clones in secret. My kids were grown men. I left them every last credit I had, didn't I? Shab, my clones needed me more than they did. They needed me just to stay alive. He had a daughter too, and her name hadn't been on the edict. He hadn't heard from her in years. One day he might find the courage to go and look for her, but now he had more pressing business. It'll be okay, son, Scarata said. If it's the last thing I do, you'll have a full lifespan. Even if I have to beat that information out of Kosai a line at a time. Especially if I have to. Odo seemed to take a sudden and intense interest in the throttle controls. The only reason we're alive at all is because you stopped the Gihal from putting us down like animals. For a moment, Scarata thought he was working up to saying something else, but he changed tact. Okay, let's see if I can at least follow the manual for this one. Oda pushed the throttle level hard forward. The deep water's nose lifted slightly, and the acceleration as she burned across the surface of the waves slapped Scarata back in the seat. In the aft view, from the hull mounted safety cam, a rake of white spray and foam churned like a blizzard. The red status bar on the console showed that the speed was moving steadily. Closer to the flashing blues cursor, labeled optimum thrust. The airframe vibrated, the drive screamed, and then Scarata's gut plummeted as the deep water parted company with the surface of the sea. Oh yeah, Odo grinned. The ship soared, and he was suddenly as excited as a little boy. Novelty always delighted him. Kendall see. Behind them, the blizzard on the monitor gave way to gray-blue sea. Scarata admitted mild relief to himself and watched Odo laying in a course for the RV point, marveling at his instant proficiency. You put a lot of trust in me, Calbia, he said. I've never piloted a hybrid like this before. I look at it this way, son. If you can't do it, nobody can. He patted Odo's hand, which was still gripping the throttle lever. I named the ship. Okay, any ideas? Odo paused, staring ahead. Ahan. Okay, Ahan it is. It was a telling choice. There was no basic translation of the word, because it was a peculiarly Mandalorian concept. Ayahan was that peaceful, perfect moment surrounded by family and friends, and remembering dead loved ones. Missing them to the point of pain, a state of mind that bittersweet could hardly begin to cover. It was about the intensity of love. Scarata doubted if Eretesi, non-Mandalorians, would believe that such a depth of feeling existed in a people they saw as a bunch of mercenary thugs. He swallowed to clear his throat and grant the name the respect it deserved. He found he was thinking of his adoptive father, Munin, and a teenage clone commando called Dove, whose death in training was Scarata's fault, a pain that made his Ayahan especially poignant. The ship shall be known as Ayahin, and remembered forever. Guy bibek misen Ayahan megaide potreli dalaskum, Oda repeated. Oyamanda. I'm sorry, Dove. There'd better be a Manda for you, some kind of immortality, or there won't be enough revenge in the galaxy for me. Scarata turned his attention to the living again. This wasn't a bad ship at all, and she only had to complete one mission, the most critical one, to find Kosai and seize her technology to halt the clones' accelerated aging. He went aft through the double doors into the crew lounge to check out the cosmetic detail. A smell of cleaning fluid, stale food, and mold hit him. The refreshers and medbay were on the starboard side, stores and galley to port, and the galley lockers were completely empty. He made a note of supplies they'd need to lay in at the first stopover, scribbling reminders on his forearm plate with a stylus. It really didn't matter what the accommodations was like, as long as Ayahan flew, or dived, in one piece. But he checked the cabins anyway, same gray and yellow trim as the rest of the interior, and not much cosmetic water damage. Not bad at all. He prodded the mattresses on the bunks, calculating 80,000 creds, but we've got 4 million from scamming the terrorists, and nobody will ever miss it. 16 berths, then, and if they needed it, there was plenty of cargo space that could be used for crew. Maybe enough for 30 people. So, if we need to bang out in a hurry, that's ample room for my boys, Core, Omega Squad, and any of the ladies, with places to spare. And then there were all the other Republic Commando squads he trained. Still more than 80 men out there in the field. His boys, and his responsibility, every bit as much as Omega. And he was neglecting them. They needed a refuge when this war was over, too. Maybe even before then. Did I do enough? I can make the difference now, lads. Shab Sad Drotin cursed the Republic. Scarata was still refitting Ayahan in his mind's eye when order loomed in the hatchway. I think we need to change course, he said. Go ahead then, son. I mean, we need to divert to do an extraction. Scarata sighed. Okay, they were on Republic time, and he was on Republic's pay, even if the clones weren't. It had better be our lads. I hate every second I spend on civilians. He trusted Ordo's assessment of necessity, and turned to go back to the cockpit. Ordo simply held out a crackling comlink. It's Delta, Ordo said. They had to bang out of Magito in a hurry, and Val got left behind. Scarata grabbed the comlink. All the bad blood between him and Val forgotten. He motioned Ordo back to the cockpit, mouthing do it at him. RC 1138 here. Sergeant. It was boss. Apologies for the interruptions. Scarata slid into the co-pilot's seat, trying not to imagine how badly things had gone if Val had been stranded behind enemy lines. He was an escape artist. Where are you? We rejoined the fleet on station. We wanted to retrieve him, but General Drusik says we're on our way, Sitrep. About 20 kilometers from Jayet. We were leaving the Dresian Kilsh bank when we met some resistance, and he fell down a crevice. Bank? They'd been there to locate communications nodes for the Marines. Went out of creds, did he? Needed some small change. It's a long story, Sergeant, and that's why General Jusik thought you'd be a wiser choice. Than who? Than telling General Zay. I won't waste time asking what the shab you were doing in a bank. Jusik, he was a smart lad, Baraka. Whatever it was, the Jedi had decided that the extraction needed to be kept quiet. Is Val alive? Unconfirmed. We lost the signal. He had kit with him that General Jusik felt you would want to recover. What kit? He cleaned out a bank vault. Credits, jewelry, bonds, the works. 2 bags. Val robbed a bank? Scarata was taken aback. The miserable old decrut was game for breaking any law, but plain theft? Never. This was Scarata's style, not Val's. Last known position. Sending you the coordinates now, with our last good ground radar scan of the terrain. The Strill's still with them, of course? Yes. We didn't see it fall. That was something. Scarata would never trust the animal, but it would lead them to Val, if it hadn't already located his body and hauled him out. If he found the Strill, he found Val. Tell General Jusik we'll sort it out, Delta, he said, and closed the link. Odo looked totally unmoved, hand hovering over the hyperspace drive controls. No point asking Commander Bakara to steer clear of us, is there? No, there wasn't. The fewer people who knew they were coming, the better. It would be hard to explain why 2 men in Mandalorian armor were blundering around a separatist planet on the Republic's tab without authorization. But the fewer the records of conversations, the easier it was to make events vanish. And Bakara wasn't the kind to ask if for ID first. Scarata didn't want his useless Jedi General Kiade Mundi in the loop either. Jedi hypocrites. It's okay for Conehead to have a family, but they'll bust Etain down to the Agricorps for it. Scarata would take his chances. No, just save Wallon's Shebs and get out of there, Scarata said. If he's still alive, jump. Ayahan lurched into star-streaked space. She was holding together just fine. Gaftikar, Outer Rim, Rebel Base, 471 days after Geonosis. Daman decided the Null Sergeant, Aiden, was a man after his own heart. Can't think straight on an empty stomach. Aiden fired his blaster into the nest of trig shavings to get the campfire going. The sun was coming up. They'd lost a night's sleep then, and the lizard-like Gaftikari was still trotting back and forth in neat lines, varying the weapons they'd collected from the drop. Got some stew left over from last night. Don't ask what's in it, 'cause I didn't. Omega Squad sat cross-legged around the fire in their black undersuits, armor plates stacked to one side. Atin held Daman's jetpack on his lap, and bent the wing's hinge assembly back into shape, with a pair of blunt-nosed grips. He hated letting mechanical things get the better of him. So, what happened to the Ark? MIA. Aiden said. His tone was totally neutral, and his expression blank. It wasn't his usual demeanor either, because Domin could see the white lines in the deeply tanned skin around his eyes and mouth. Aiden usually smiled a lot, but he wasn't smiling now. So I've done a res of Iyat, and I've put together as complete a plan of the government building as I can. Except for strength, Nana asked. Apart from the locals, minimal. I thought this was a hotbed of SEP activity that had to be neutralized pronto. Oh dear Novad, you've been taking intel at face value again, haven't you? Aiden built the fire with meticulous care, stacking branches and dry grasses on the mound, and watching the flames grow. We better cure you of that. Fi peered into the pot of stew. It's okay. I've been teaching him sarcasm. He'll be ready for comic exaggeration soon. Looks quite a nice, peaceful place, Etten said. Not exactly strategic. Yet, Aiden stirred the pot with a stick. It really did smell good. Lovely city, clean, pretty buildings. Lots of harmless fun to enjoy. And of no military use to use whatsoever. Daman kept an eye on the Keftikari. Now that the sun was coming up, he could see that their light beige scales were slightly iridescent. They had sharp muzzles and small black eyes with discerning red slit-like pupils, and he'd never seen so many varied weapons strung on one belt. They were more tooled up than the Sergeant Cal in a bad mood. Their blades, blasters, and metal bars jingled like wind chimes. One tall lizard provided his own musical accompaniment as he walked, swinging his tails to balance under a load of Ereb pots. I see you taught them all about stealth then, Atten said. Aiden stared at him. Prudy warned me that you were an awkward customer. Fanny Otto warned Prudy I was argumentative. Your reputation precedes you then, said Aiden. They're good fighters, trust me. I hear a butt coming, said Nina. We are specially trained to hear that coming at 100 clicks. But Aden slapped the stew into their waiting mess tins. When Domin was this hungry, he'd eat flimsy packing cases. Yes, the but is that this is going to end in tears yet. Human city. All the cities are human settlements, but scruffy little villages, lizard land. So, who are the Geftikari? They all are. Neither species is native. The human colonists brought in the lizard lads to build the place. And now the lizards wants to run the show on account of their numbers. Actually, the lizards are merits. Why are the Seps supporting the humans then? Because the Republic wants the Kellyrium and Norax deposits here. Or at least Shinio mining does. And the humans are happier without Shinio moving in. I'm lost, said Nina. The Seps have offered to save Geftikari from us. So we are going to give them something to object to. I don't make the policy. I just train guerrillas and slot bad guys. They lapsed into silence and ate the stew, which was actually remarkably tasty. The rebels, the Merits, had started assembling an E-Reb without the manual, and the way a group of them clustered around the heavy blaster and handled the components gave Daman the impression that they swarmed over the enemies. There was something about the rapid and coordinated movements that reminded him of insects and unnerved him. "Why are you a sergeant and the rest of the gnolls are officers?" Fry asked. "Didn't you pass your promotion board?" Aiden didn't seem offended. It was hard to tell what would provoke a gnoll. Sometimes it took nothing at all. I preferred to be a NCO. If it's good enough for Calbia, it's good enough for me. Vi seemed satisfied with the explanation. Aten was concentrating on his stew, and Nina was watching the Merits getting to grips with a large artillery piece. "They're good at assembling things," Aiden said. "Good visuospatial ability." It was the first time any of them had met Adin, and Daman was always keen to get the measure of another of Karata's gnolls. How had he managed to keep them apart from the commandos during training for so many years? The young gnolls terrified the Kaminoans by running wild around Tipoca City, and that was about the only time the commando squad saw them, stealing equipment, sabotaging systems, and Daman had never forgotten this, even scaling the supports of the huge domed ceilings, swinging around hundreds of meters above the floor, and placing blaster fire to within centimeters of the Kaminoan technicians. The gnolls never cared, never seemed afraid. Even then, they answered only to Kalskarata, and the Kaminoans wouldn't dare cross Kalbia. Kalbia said the Kaminoans had messed up the gnolls, and so they deserved what they got. If the Kaminoans complained, he said, he'd sort them. Skarata used sort as a euphemism for any form of violence. His specialist subject, a Marat, trotted over and peered into the stew, head jerking slightly like a droid. "You like it?" Aten, kneeling down to help himself to another portion, looked up innocently. The scar across his face, the one that Val had given him, was a thin white line now. "It's very tasty. My great-grandmother," the Merit beamed. It was weird to watch a lizard smile like human. "They seem to have a double row of small triangular teeth. She'll be happy." Daman noticed Aden slide forward a little and tried to interrupt the exchange. Aten. But Aten was off, being polite to the locals and taking his hearts and minds rules seriously. "Is it her recipe then?" "Aten." "It's her," said the Merit, and wandered off. Aten stared into the bowl. There was a moment of complete silence, and Aden sighed. Vi put his knuckles to his mouth and stifled nervous laughter. But it didn't work. Nina chewed to a halt. Daman tried to be culturally sensitive and all that. but he was hungry, and the Marets seemed pleased. They were enjoying the meal. Oh, fear feck. Aten put his mess tin down on the ground and sat back on his heels. He screwed his eyes shut tight, and judging by the way his lips compressed, he was in serious digestive crisis, as Odo called it. Then he walked back on his heels, stood up, and bolted for the nearest bushes. He's throwing up, Nina said, and went on eating. The faint sound of retching confirmed his diagnosis. Aden shrugged. It's not like they killed her to eat her. It's not like they killed her to eat her. It's how they dispose of their dead. They like to think they do their families in some good after they're gone. It's rude not to tuck in. Cultural diversity's a wonderful thing, I observed, but he looked quite pale. What do they do for desserts? Nina fished out a chunk of lean meat and gazed at it, then popped it into his mouth and chewed thoughtfully. Darman didn't know he could be so daring. I never thought I'd resort to cannibalism. It's not cannibalism for us, Nina, Eden said. Just for them. That's the Grand Army for you. Fi's face seemed back to its normal color again. See the galaxy meet fascinating new species and snack on them. Well, we won't be alone. Aiden looked up, all concerned, as Aten walked back unsteadily from the bushes, wiping his mouth. You okay? You did that deliberately. You could have told me before I started eating. I said, don't ask, and I said I hadn't. Aten quiet, methodical Aten. Had been one of Val's training company, not Skarata's. It showed Aden stared at Aten, and Aten stared back. Nina rolled his eyes as if he was shaping up to separate them, and it wouldn't have been the first time that Aten needed hauling out of a confrontation. There was something about the way Val trained his men that gave them a core of wildness, a complete inability to see sense and back down when pushed too far. Aden almost broke into a grin. You tried to vibroblade Val, didn't you? We all heard about that. Aden gave him the silent routine. Daman waited for Aden to run out of patience and give Aden a good slap, as Fi liked to call it. But he just shrugged and rummaged in his pockets. Okay, said Aden. He found what he was looking for and tossed a ration ball across to Aten, who caught it. First, you can grow a shabla beard, because you're going to have to infiltrate Iyat. And they're not used to seeing crowds. Mix yourself up a bit and choose who gets to stay looking normal. Vi perked up immediately. I'll dress up as a lizard if I can have a trip into town. Done, Aden said. But scrub the scaly look, because Merits don't go into the cities now, except to shoot the locals. That's why a human's best suited to do assassinations, once you've got your bearings. I want two of you to reach Iyat again and get a few spy cams planted. The Marets can't go in unnoticed, and whatever intel Sol put together went with him. Sol, said Fi. Alpha 30, Aden said. That was his name, Sol. Daman finished his stew and watched Aden. He wasn't pleased that much was obvious. Maybe it was having to follow up on an alpha arc when he thought he had more important business. Maybe it was just normal irritation at being tasked to carry out a mission that looked pointless and wasn't resourced. He worked alone, and that had to take its toll on any man's will. Nana scraped out his mess tin and rinsed it clean with water from his bottle. I think we should be concentrating our forces on kicking the Osik out of the main SEP homeworlds, he said suddenly. Because if we keep this up, we'll be down to one clone per planet, showing the locals a field mineral on how to throw stones. Aiden turned his head slowly, parted his lips as if to speak. He paused. He seemed to measuring his words. You're in good company, he said. Lots of us do, including General Zay. But the Chancellor wants to avoid too much collateral damage. No pounding, no surging, no offending the civies. No resources. Enough resources not to lose, but not enough to win, Aiden said. He just feeding a stalemate, the moron. Daman thought it was time they got on with making friends with the Merits. He stood up and ambled over to the lizards, wondering if there might be anything in Iyat that he could acquire for Etain. It was hard to think of anything that a Jedi might want. They avoid possessions. You know what's been bothering me? Five voice drifted across the center of the camp. The Merits had finished calibrating the artillery piece and were admiring it. What if the war had broken out when we were 5 years into our training, instead of 8, 9, 10? What? Aiden asked. Nobody knows when a war is going to start. Not years ahead anyway. It's not like you can book one in advance. So, there we are, fully trained, and then it all kicks off. Very lucky. What if it had all gone to Purdue years before? What if we'd been half-trained, still just kids? Then we'd have been fighting in diapers, Aten muttered, because the Republic didn't have any other army worth a mott's backside. I raised an eyebrow. Shabla lucky, if you ask me. Time to move it, Aden said sharply, and Daman suspected he was breaking up the speculation, for reason. Judging by the expression on Fai's face, he felt that too. I'll bring you up to speed with the local situation, and you can spend the rest of the day getting to know our allies. The longer the war went on, the less sense it made to Daman. After years of clear certainty in training, knowing what he had to do and why he would have to do it, because there had never been any doubt in anyone's mind that they would one day be deployed. The reality of the war didn't match any of it. Shambolic organizations, indecisive leadership from the top, and too many gray areas. The more places he was sent, the more things Daman saw that made him ask why they didn't just let planets cede from the Republic. Life would go on. Pie's thinking was getting to him. Every thought now started with a why. Stay busy. There was nothing he could about it now except get on with his job. He smiled at the merits. "I'm demand," he said, holding out his hand for shaking. "Want me to show you how to make shrapnel out of a droid?"